All right, y'all, let's come together. I'm out here making a big, bold statement on YouTube.com today, and that is K-pop standing is designed to be toxic. And don't you dare say, but blank, because I'm going to prove you wrong. Hello, my beautiful people. I'm here to provide my water's weight take as to why I believe wholeheartedly that the K-pop fandom is made to be toxic. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time now because people just love pointing fingers at everybody but themselves. I'll be honest, I'm not a perfect person. I'm honestly a pretty messy person off this platform, and I've gotten mass quote tweeted on Twitter before, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a reason as to why director Paul Feig calls fandom is, and I quote, home to some of the biggest assholes I've ever met in my life. Let's dissect as to why people are awful in the fandom culture, plus some advice with my own personal experiences. Perception of fandom being awful has persisted for quite some time now. In fact, it's argued by Jolie Jensen that it is viewed as a symptom of social dysfunction by society and the media. They write, since the 1950s, images of teens, rock and roll, and out-of-control crowds have been intertwined. In press coverage, the dangers of violence, drink, drugs, sexual, and racial mingling are connected to music popular with young people. Like, there's this media perception that fans of anything, whether it be a boy group or a sports team, that they tend to be violent and aggressive, which, while sometimes true, it doesn't speak to all fans necessarily. Suzanne Scott writes, journalists will frame fans as trolls, for example, because, quote, they have become too aggressive in their effective claims to sexual ownership, manifested in actively attempting to sway or collectively criticize particular representational choices. So this unfair assessment makes people get defensive and, well, be a part of this self-fulfilling prophecy of, yeah, we're toxic, or you tell us that we're toxic, and we'll be toxic as well.
Okay. Well, if that makes me a villain, then so fucking be it. I can play the fucking villain.
Yeah, do it!
This is why people get so defensive about the press, to the point of creating a vacuum in which they don't listen to anybody but the company and the groups themselves, sometimes twisting the words to fit a certain narrative. I've seen this happen within the ARMY community, and as someone who's pressed herself, it's really sad to see this as a defense mechanism. After all, why support the people who antagonize you? Ray Evangelista writes while assessing the Rick and Morty fandom. A fan's culture, feelings of ownership and protectiveness over something they enjoy can lead to them antagonizing anyone online, including the people who produce the things they enjoy. This could explain as to why fandoms also contradict the artists that they're saying or advocate, which can be really bad. Like, of course there's going to be times when our favorites fuck up or even change their minds about something, but the way how we're so protective to make sure they don't get backlash is so strong that we might gaslight other people in order to protect them. Social media platforms or environments like Twitter and Instagram and TikTok really do allow people to be anonymous. According to a study done by Robert Sonje, a psychologist at Goldsmiths College in London, cyberbullying happens for, quote, reasons for these can be internal or external, such as jealousy, boredom, to have power over others, knowing that there are no physical consequences as it is through online. This is very true considering the fact that people would literally make dummy accounts just to drag people online. It's easy to make accounts without verifying, creating a situation in which people can say really mean shit and get away with it. I think that this is probably the most evil part about social media platforms, and no matter what, people will continue to get away with it no matter how much we block and report these people. I did a bit of a topic in another video in depth if you guys want to check it out, but parasocial relationships basically replace or try to imitate the relationships that we as a society lack. Jensen again writes, fandom, especially excessive fandom, is defined as a form of psychological compensation, an attempt to make up for what the modern life lacks. I mean, if we really do think about it, why did we start photo collecting at the start of the pandemic? Why did we tend to love our face more when we're single? Why do we spend more time online when we're depressed? These things eventually add up and make sense, don't you think? Whether we like to believe it or not, there's a level of hierarchy in each fandom. Big accounts and what they say bear weight as they are considered to be the leaders of the fandom unofficially. Because they have such a big following, they have to be responsible for their words, which can be so unserious on Twitter, for example, because they can just say they're kidding when they do a hot take and not have consequences for it. According to Gwyneth Gast, they write, as friendships are based on similarities, negative opinions and thoughts exhibited on Twitter by a large account will be supported by followers or friends. As these friends develop, interaction with another result in attitudes and beliefs becoming influenced. There is also an urge to agree on one's point of view simply due to loyalty and the development of friendships. Let's be real for a second. When was the last time that you have been silent on an issue and the whole TL was feeling passionate about it because you felt differently? Maybe you ended up liking the tweets that express something differently, or use Twitter circles or discuss in the DMs or private accounts by quote RTing the hot take. We have all been scared to express how we feel online in fear of being dragged, and honestly, that's not normal. I mean, as much as I love people online, I also don't always agree with these people, and it's okay to admit that. And I think that Twitter kind of creates this platform to where you kind of becomes like an echo chamber in which you just continue to repeat the same things over and over again, and it's to the point where it really doesn't mean anything. And it's getting so bad to where I've actually seen so many instances, for example, this whole thing with Yoongi having a tour. There's a lot of hot takes that it's unfair that certain countries get to have so many dates, for example, in the US, whereas other countries like the Philippines or Brazil or other places that do a lot of have purchased a lot of albums and merch don't get shows. And they would rather blame it. There's this whole narrative to blame on the people who get to have shows versus people who don't. And it becomes this whole thing where it kind of low-key starts to become really messed up and elitist, whereas it should be more addressed to the bigger concerns of the fact that the company doesn't see these places are profitable enough, even though the fact that they very much are. That's an argument, for example. Another thing as well is that there's a lack of clear authority figures to police these kinds of actions. Maybe there's some terms and conditions of a social media platform to not cyberbully or dox, but not everything is caught and taken down. Even then, if there's enough of a mob, you can be harassed for days or even months or years into the future because it's embedded in the fandom. It's not to say that it's bad to not have people in the corner wagging their finger to say no to being toxic. It's just really unrealistic for people to be appointed as that and moderate the entire fandom, because people will react differently to the same news. However, it's important to us to create open dialogue and to have hard conversations on the feed to better foster a community that is a lot more sustainable and communicative and cooperative. And that definitely takes a lot of time. So it's time to reveal something about myself. I was a part of a Big Bang fandom so long ago, from 2012 to 2017. I was pretty active on Tumblr for the most part and did quite a lot of stuff, from making GIFs, being an archiver, running 2 Big Bang focused blogs, and including my own personal blog, and managing other groups' blogs as well. At the time, I was really depressed and had a lot of downtime as a late teen to early 20-something, living in an abusive household, so your girl was doing some major escapist shit back then to survive. During my time in the fandom, though, I learned a lot about how toxic a fandom can get, and as someone who has been in another fandom and seeing my beloved mutuals going through the same things, I thought I could provide some lessons. 1. Fandom friendships are not meant to last. I think this is the biggest lesson I learned from the get-go. Actually, I had a friend group that I was in for about 10 years that started from me, Don't Laugh, role-playing GD in a kpop role-playing network, and I thought they were a part of my family. It turns out they weren't, unfortunately, and it was something that I realized that, wow, we really didn't have much in common despite that initial contact. And we are clearly very different people from 10 years ago. The memes are no longer hitting, and our common interests were so far in between that it was hard to keep track of each people's business. It was one thing if we grew distant and then eventually got back in touch by running to each other, but the thing is, they don't live near me, and there was no way I could keep in touch with them outside of texting them online. I've also met so many people through the VIP fandom who stopped being friends with me the moment I expressed different opinions about Big Bang, which is another thing. 2. Don't be afraid to express your different opinions. You'll find your own people. I think it's daunting to be in a situation to where you're the only person expressing these opinions. During my time in the fandom, I have expressed how uncomfortable I was. For example, GD was messing around with this DJ who physically hurt his ex-girlfriend at the time because it hit way too close to home. And even though I was scared to admit this out loud in fear of getting dragged, I realized that this was important because I had experienced abusive behavior in my family, so I stood by my opinion up front. It turned out a lot of people had the same opinions as well, and I was glad I spoke up about it. It wasn't until I got into the ARMY fandom when I saw that there's a bit of more openness, and I realized that discourse is important. Discourse is needed in order to keep a fandom thriving as it is. Honestly, if it's a bit too much, for example, you can always make a private account or just rant it about it in the DMs. I know I have a group of people and a separate account separately when I want to talk shit, and it's prevented me from spilling controversial opinions that would have gotten me doxxed or something. 3. People will use you if you provide a service. One day I'll be able to go into how much corporations mooch off of free fan labor like translations, archiving, and streaming, but one of the things I've dreadfully learned is that people will hella use you if you can. When I was in the VIP fandom, I was an archiver that paid for content and posted it online for people to watch. I had like 3 years of content all in 4K and shit, and like I was really good at it. And with that kind of power, I was getting noticed by everybody, which I guess for a depressed me, it worked, but it also attracted the wrong people. Like, I was being asked by so many people to share the original links so the archivers could do it themselves. Some people who I know for sure did not like my opinions, for example, would kiss my ass for links before I posted them, things like that. I remember this one archiver once asked me to download HD content from like 10 years ago from this sketchy site and all in another language for them to not credit me for it at all. It was one of those things where clearly if you're someone on anywhere, people would just befriend you for favors, because I saw this pattern happen when I was in the fanfic community for a while too. After a while, it just becomes really obvious and depressing, and because you hear from the grapevine their real thoughts of you and their intentions of getting to know you, and it's sad. Fandom can very much be a place that's taking and never giving back at its very worst. Speaking of the verse, it reminds me of 4, curating your feed. I can't even begin to explain how difficult it is when you're trying to find friends who like the same group, only them for TV shooters, solo stands, are always argumentative, doing shitty hot takes, etc. This could get sad really fast when you feel like you're the only person who thinks differently or isn't as intense. For example, I follow specifically people who are like-minded like me, level-headed, anti-corporations, allow idols to be humans, have other interests besides the group I'm into, etc. Most of my followings are also friends from my old fandom and like other groups. Don't be afraid to block people. I block people so freely on my main Twitter account, and it's not even funny. Like, it's not even the fandoms that I don't like, it's even people from my fandom too who don't align with my beliefs or would just rile me up. I think it's important to clean your feed as much as possible, because this is supposed to be your happy place and not a place that causes you stress. Lastly, 5, be unserious. We gotta realize that honestly, the fandom is supposed to be a fun activity that we can participate in and not be bowed down by work and school. It's so easy to get caught up in the nitty-gritty of things before you step back and go, oh my god, was I stressed out about like HD photos of GD? Or am I not posting a gift set within an hour? Or not participating in the latest beef? It's okay to not take everything seriously, whether it be streaming, watching every single thing, buying every single thing, not participating in fan wars, not just liking one thing, etc., etc. It's okay to be human and be individualistically different, and I think that's kind of beautiful. What are some of your icks in K-pop fandoms? And what kind of advice would you give to someone who's becoming a stan? Leave it in the comments below. If you like this video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. I'll catch you in the next video.